Hey everyone, welcome to Movie Marathon's HQ, where we do movie marathons connected to new releases and where we enjoy and review some of our favorite movies. This video is part of the Avengers Doomsday Movie Marathon, where we are watching one movie every week as we prepare for the release of Avengers Doomsday in December 2026. Today we are discussing Thor Ragnarok. Released in 2017 and directed by Taika Waititi, this is the third Thor movie and a wildly different take on Thor and his universe and everything about him. Overall, I love this movie. I think it's a lot of fun and it's a really fresh look at the character. The tone of this movie is so different than the previous two Thor movies and his appearance in the two Avengers movies, and it really works for me. I thought they missed the mark on the characterization of Thor initially in the first movie. I think it got better in the Avengers. It got better in Thor: The Dark World, although that movie was not as strong. And then he's kind of the same in Age of Ultron, although I don't like his little side quest. So he's kind of a mix here, where they got him wrong initially, and then he hasn't really, for me, hit his stride. So then here in this movie, they take a totally different take, and I think they nail it. For positives, I'll mention the score by Mark Mothersbaugh, the humor and the tone, the casting, particularly of Cate Blanchett as Hela, Chef Goldblum as Grand Master, and Taika Waititi as the voice of Korg. Another positive is the characters and the character work in general, especially having Hulk and Bruce Banner as a secondary character in this movie. And the last positive is the characterization of Thor, which I mentioned before, but I'll get more into that. And for negatives, I'll just mention the use of Valkyrie in this movie. Spoilers ahead for Thor Ragnarok. First is the score of this movie. It's done by Mark Mothersbaugh, who was not the composer on the previous Thor movies, but it's a great job here. It's very electric guitar and psychedelic and kind of rebellious, and so that fits the tone of this movie, which is so rock and roll, Ragnarok and roll, some might say, which I think would be a really great either metal band name or an album name. So go ahead and use Ragnarok and roll if it hasn't been used already. But anyways, the score in this movie I think stands out quite a bit. It's better than the other Thor scores and really amps up the tone, especially in the action moments and the moments when the score gets really heavy. So I think that's the first positive to love about this movie. I also really love the humor and the tone in this movie. It's very unique for the MCU. There have been comedies and humor across all the MCU movies, but Ant-Man and Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2 are, for me, the most humorous, but this is on another level. It's very consistent with Taika Waititi's other work. If you haven't seen The Hunt for the Wilder People or What We Do in the Shadows, please do yourself a favor and check those out. They're really funny and really enjoyable and on brand for Taika Waititi. And I think Chris Hemsworth does a really good job with the humor. He's done some other comedic things in his career, but he's got great timing and he's got great intonations and a great sense for comedy, and he works really well in the Thor character, totally on his head this way. And then the tone of this movie, and so I separated these because yes, the tone is humorous, but also this movie is very dark. It takes everything, just about everything, away from Thor that he values. His father Odin passes away, and his sister he didn't know about comes and destroys his hammer, which is kind of the manifestation of a lot of his identity, and she destroys it outright and easily. Almost all of Asgard is taken over and vanquished, and he's thrown again in a fish out of water type tone movie, but instead of him being on Earth and being the fish out of water, he's totally out of his element. So it's a very dark movie, but balanced with the humor. And I think that combination is why it works so well. Next is the casting. We are introduced to some new characters in Thor Ragnarok, and chief among them is Cate Blanchett as Hela, the goddess of death. She's so great in this movie. She's very talented in everything she's done. But in this movie, she does something cool with this role where she's kind of hammy and kind of over the top, but not so much that it loses its momentum. She does seem like a real character with real motivations and real history and vengeance and power. um, and also seems like somebody that Thor could never defeat. So it sets up an interesting dynamic. And then I don't love the retcon that she's kind of the sister that he never knew about. That kind of just seems like it was made for this movie, but it does kind of work anyway. So they've got an interesting family dynamic there. Then we get Chef Goldblum as the Grand Master, who's very silly, very strange, but seems like the Collector from Guardians of the Galaxy, and seems like one of these cosmic entities who lives forever and just kind of does things to be interesting and to be entertained. And he does a great job in his own style that Goldblum always brings. And then Taika Waititi cast himself as the voice of Korg, the rock monster, who, as far as I know, is not from the comics, and he was created just for this movie. But Taika based him on the stereotypical kind of New Zealander bouncer at a nightclub who is not gruff and mean, but also could take you out easily. And I think Korg works really well there. Meek is kind of weird with this little alien thing, but just the whole revolution and the humor of Korg really works. And so the casting of those three characters is really, really great. I just want to mention that for a long time leading up to Infinity War, I thought that they might take something from the comics and adapt it for the MCU in a way that I thought could work and would be pretty interesting. In the comics, the motivation for Thanos for destroying half of all life in the universe is that he is in love with the goddess of death, like the personification of death. And often in the comics, she's depicted as female and kind of a skeleton Grim Reaper. But Thanos is in love with her, and as a tribute to her, what better tribute could there be than the extinction of many souls across the universe? So his motivation is based on love. And I thought, leading up to Infinity War, maybe they will take Hela and make her the embodiment of death. And then Thanos will have the same motivation in Infinity War as he did in the comics, that he wants to wipe out all life in the universe to prove his love to Hela. And I thought that could work. After seeing Thor Ragnarok and we meet Hela, and it seems pretty decisive that she has met her end. It became clear that that wasn't the case. And ultimately, you got to trust the Russo brothers and Marcus and McFeely over me, even. And I think the motivation for Thanos of seeking true balance and calling it mercy, that's a way better motivation, anyways. But that was my theory leading into Infinity War. Another positive that's kind of related to casting is just how they use the characters here. So I love what they do with Thor, and we'll get into that specifically as he's the main character. And I love the villain and what they do there, but also bringing in Mark Ruffalo again as Bruce Banner and the Hulk works really well. I think it doesn't totally make sense how the Hulk got onto the planet Sakaar, other than at the end of Age of Ultron, he's in the Quinjet, which I guess hit a time-space portal or something and got him there. It doesn't really make sense, but whatever, he's there. And I love that he's become a gladiator, and the Hulk has kept out Banner for all of these years. So then Hulk can speak and can function and has been exclusively Hulk for all this time. So Banner is kind of cramped in their psyche together in a Jekyll and Hyde scenario. I think it's really interesting. And then having the Hulk as a side character, I think works better. I talked about that in my Avengers review. I think he works better as a side character than as a main character. And here that is also the case. And he works really well going back and forth with Thor. And seeing him as a gladiator is just awesome. Carl Urban is here as Scourge the Executioner. It's a very small role, and it's not huge or hugely important, but he is a lot of fun and kind of does a little bit of interesting things there. I love seeing Fenris Wolf, who is from the comics, and just looks great. A massive, scary wolf that Hela rides into battle. Super cool. And then I love Surtur. So Surtur is from the comics and is a big fire demon thing. And I like how he comes in at the beginning. There's some very comedic stuff when Thor meets him. He gets the crown and keeps it in the vault. But then at the end of the movie, they use the vault to resurrect Surtur to destroy Asgard. And I think he just looks great as a massive, gigantic fire demon. And just really fun. So this whole movie and how they use the characters and who they introduce and how they bring them all in, I think works really well, with one exception that we'll get into. But that's kind of connected to casting, but another positive. And now the characterization of Thor. as I've said before, I wasn't totally a fan of how they introduced him in the first Thor, and then he kind of got better, but still not quite 100% there. And then here in this pivot and this reimagining, they nail it. I think they balance his humor, they balance the darkness, they balance the fact that he had been chasing this throne all of his life, and then now he doesn't want it. I feel like in this movie he has real character growth. I mentioned before, but they strip away everything that makes Thor Thor, and he has to find out who he is. And then they have that amazing scene at the end when Hela's about to take him out, and then she says, "I'm the goddess of death. What are you the god of again?" Reminding him that he is the god of thunder. Hammer or not, he's the god of thunder. And then he has that awesome lightning-filled entrance queued up to the Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin, which is just chef's kiss, beautiful. And so I think they finally get what works for Thor, and it really works for me in this movie. So the characterization has come full circle to where it needed to be. And then for a negative to mention, it's hard to put this one as a negative, but Tessa Thompson is new as a character called Valkyrie. And Valkyrie is a character in the comics, but here Valkyrie are kind of a group of warriors from Asgard, and then the Valkyrie in this movie is the last remaining one of them. So it's not as if Valkyrie is the only Valkyrie; it's just one of a group. And Tessa Thompson isn't bad in it. I just think the character's kind of flat. She's traumatized by what happened to her, so that is interesting, and she copes with that trauma by drinking excessively. But then it just kind of seems like they use that for humor. Oh, she fell over because she's drunk, and that humor's not too funny, I don't think. And so then she's in this movie, and she's kind of an antagonist, but I don't know why. And then Thor doesn't know who she is, and we don't know who she is, but we know she's mad at him. Then eventually they figure out who she is, and I don't feel any connection to her. So the way she's introduced and the way she's like sort of redeemed, and then she joins their team of the Revengers, sort of, but not really willingly. I just can't really get behind her, and I can't root for her. So Tessa Thompson doesn't do bad. I just think the character's underwritten, and so for that reason I have to put it as a negative. Oh, and then one last positive is just the visual effects. In general, the visual effects look great, and Hulk looks better than ever, I think, and Thor's lightning stuff and Surtur, and it all looks really good. I probably should have mentioned visual effects as a positive, but there's one aspect of it that I think is super negative, and that's when Hela cuts out Thor's eye. It looks like they chose a practical effect, and I think this is an example when some people who say practical effects are always better than CGI effects. I think this is an example where no, CGI would have been better. They gave him like a practical gouged out eye, but then they get to a scene where he's front lit and you can just see it's makeup. His eyes closed like this and he's got makeup. And it just takes you out of the movie. There's no movie magic there. I think a CGI render could have made it more believable that his eye was actually gone. Because, of course it wasn't. It's a movie. So, yes, positive in that the visual effects do look great, but that's a major negative, and it really bothers me. When I first saw the movie, every time I've rewatched it, and for this rewatch, I think that's a very pretty bad special effect. Now, how might Thor Ragnarok connect to Avengers Doomsday? Well, we know that Chris Hemsworth is going to return as Thor in Avengers Doomsday, so we are going to see him. I predict that he's going to meet his end in that movie at the hands of Doom. We also know that Tom Hiddleston as Loki will make a return in Avengers Doomsday. I think he will be sitting at the Citadel at the center of time on his throne, and I think Doom is going to find him there, and it's not going to go well for Loki there. Jane Foster is not in this movie, which is kind of weird, and spoilers for future movies, but we do know that she's alive at the time of Doomsday, though she's not on the cast list, so I don't expect to see her. Heimdall is also not on the cast list, so I don't expect to see Idris Elba. And I don't think there's going to be any mention of Infinity Stones in Avengers Doomsday. So that's my review of Thor Ragnarok. What do you think of this movie, and how do you think it might connect to Avengers Doomsday? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. Follow Movie Marathons HQ on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and also on Letterboxd, where you can see all of the movie marathons that we've done and all the ones that we have coming up. The next movie in this marathon is part of 2 movie marathons. It's part of the Avengers Doomsday Movie Marathon and part of the newly announced Spider-Man Brand New Day Movie Marathon. So check that one out. The next movie is Venom. See you at the movies.